Hello and welcome to the Slow Ready Podcast, a casual drive into the music and culture of Goose. I'm Mike.
And I'm Alex.
And on today's episode, we are going to do a deep dive on one of Goose's earliest and best songs, Arcadia. But first, as always, the best way to keep up with us is on social media at Slow Ready Pod. Pretty much anywhere you can be on social media, we are also at that. And we also have an email, slowreadypod@gmail.com. If you'd ever like to write in, we'd love to hear from you, love to chat about all things Goose. So please give us a follow. We have a lot of great topics coming up. And we're going to get into this deep dive in just a moment. But first, we'd like to get into the news and notes from this week with Goose in our first segment, Hot Tea. So one of the biggest things for this week was that the single Your Direction came out. I guess it came out a second time because it was out a little bit last week and then taken down. But it's back out for real and doesn't seem to be disappearing again anytime soon. So really cool to hear another song from Goose's upcoming album, Everything Must Go. I'm sure you've checked it out quite a few times, Alex. Any thoughts here on this new single?
We posted it, but Goose is a yacht rock band now. A Christian yacht rock band, according to some. And it's a fun song. It sounds like Fleetwood Mac, some have said. And our friend of the pod, Garrett, actually made a video where he mashed up Fleetwood Mac and Your Direction together, and they just seamlessly go together. So it's really, really kind of catchy earworm. I don't know how it's going to translate live. There's obviously some old recordings of Visudo playing it like 12 years ago or something like that are like grainy and not the best recordings, but it sounds very similar. So we'll see how it translates live. And quick shout out to this outstandingly terrible, amazing music video. You have a chance to watch that, Mike?
Yeah, the music video is really something else. I would say that it definitely fits into the wheelhouse or palette of a lot of Goose's other creative endeavors here. So it's an interesting watch. It definitely fits in with their unique personality as a band, but definitely got a couple chuckles out of it. It's pretty out there. As far as the song goes, definitely agree with the Fleetwood Mac vibes. It's got a Dreams kind of feel to it. And it was played by Visudo, I think, 4 times, according to El Goose. So back in 2012, really old song. Kind of cool that they're digging it out and, rebrandishing it for Goose. And I have a lot of the same questions as you. It's such a departure for them sound-wise and there's a lot of space in the song. So it'll be interesting to see how that translates live. I feel like they're going to have to make some changes for it in the live format, but it also feels like it's got some interesting potential. It's probably a lot of different directions it can go with improv. So really exciting stuff there. And then another big announcement in the Goose world, they're going to be opening for Dave Matthews Band at the Gorge here around Labor Day weekend. So that's obviously a huge step up, keeping in line with MSG and the first, festival in Mexico. So lots of big things for Goose this year. This is no exception. Any thoughts on that, Alex? I know we've both been a couple times.
Yeah, we've both been to the Gorge a couple of times for Labor Day weekend. It's kind of how we met. But now we're fully on the Goose train, and it's really cool to see them at Heaven's Amphitheater, just one of the premier venues you can go to. Only advice I would give is when you enter the venue, if you've never been, stay left, because then you'll crest the hill and see the gorgeous view. And hopefully GMB won't be dumb this time and actually let Rick or someone from the band guest like they didn't do at Soulshine, which was just bizarre.
It's a weird choice for sure. But yeah, echoing what Alex said, I don't think either one of us is going to be making the pilgrimage out there. I'm going to wait until Goose is hopefully headlining the Gorge at some point. But all that being said, it's, for my money, the greatest amphitheater you can go. The view is like nothing you've ever seen. So if you want to make a weekend out of it, to me, I think Goose as an opener is probably not worth all the money to get to that side of the country. But it is a really, really cool venue. And I'm just super, super excited as a Goose fanatic that they're getting to play there because the stage is ridiculous and they definitely deserve it.
Yeah, and if you have any questions or want any pointers, if you decided to go for the first time, we've both been, so we might have some mediocre advice to give you, but we're happy to talk about it.
Absolutely, because it is quite an endeavor to get there if you're not based on the West Coast. And then last piece of news here, and this is a little bit heavy and difficult to discuss, I suppose would probably be the best way to put it, but Jeff is no longer in the band, so we'll probably keep things high level here, but any initial thoughts on obviously the biggest and weightiest news in the Goose world here, Alex?
Yeah, it's obviously a really difficult subject to broach, and I hope that you extend us a little bit of grace here if our statement isn't exactly what you're hoping for or a lengthy discussion about what's going on. We're definitely not like Goose insiders of any kind with any kind of special access to the band or anything, so we don't know anything concrete outside of what the band and Jeff themselves posted. So, and with all those rumors and speculation, we don't want to speculate or add to that ourselves without knowing anything more concrete. But that being said, all of that talk about these rumors and speculation and stuff like that has led to a lot of dialogue about various behavior within the jam band community and shows in general and the music world in general. And we just want to say we advocate for creating safe spaces for everybody who goes to a show. And we actually just did an episode with Ashley from Groove Safe a couple episodes ago, which is really interestingly timely, a great conversation about creating safe spaces at live events.
Yeah, perfectly said. I don't have a ton to add to that. Definitely echoing, we don't have any inside information. So if you ask me any questions, I'm going to tell you what I've told everyone else. I don't know anything, and I'm respecting the band's decision here. As a fan, it's obviously difficult. We've gone through a lot of change in the last year plus here, but at the same time, I know that Goose is going to be absolutely fine. We saw that on Winter Tour here recently, and still just as excited about the future of the band as I was before all of this, but definitely sucks.
Yeah, it definitely does suck. And real quick, no, it also marks the end of Arabolo, unfortunately. But it sounds like we're just going to get a pivot to acoustic full band Goose, just from speculating from the scheduling from Viva El Gonzo and stuff like that.
Really good call out there too. I don't think Acoustic Goose is going anywhere. It's just probably format's going to look a little bit different, but if it looks anything like it did in Cincinnati last year, I think we'll all be a-okay with that. So we'll move forward as best as we can. But that is the news and notes from this week. So with that, we're going to get into our main topic, the flow down for this week, which of course is, as we said, an Arcadia deep dive. So wanted to start with some of the like high level points here about Arcadia. If you look at the definition, it states that it's a region or scene of simple pleasure and quiet. It comes from ancient Greece, frequently chosen as a background for pastoral poetry, which, God, when you just think about all this, it definitely sounds like it's super in Rick's wheelhouse as far as writing about. And it was first played in 2014, right around the very beginning of Goose. It's been played a ton, 187 times in total, about once every 4 shows. And it was the third track on their debut album, Moon Cabin. So me and Alex, we did a deep dive on Arcadia here not too long ago. So we went through a lot of this already, but any just high level thoughts or anything you want to recap from our Moon Cabin album here, Alex, to get started?
Yeah, I believe that was episode 8 of the podcast. Don't quote me on that because that feels like a lifetime ago. We've kind of finally getting our footing with this podcasting thing, and those were the early days. But yeah, third track on Moon Cabin. I think I still feel the same way I did when we recorded that. That it wasn't necessarily the easiest listen for me to get through the studio cut of this because I just love the live cut so much. But it really interesting sound to this Arcadia compared to what we get now because you have Chris Enright on the keys and it's a very like almost tack piano kind of like saloony vibe with the ripping Rick solo at the end. But yeah, it's a really interesting listen and kind of a flashback into how different Goose was almost 10 years ago now.
Totally, yeah. The keys on that entire album from Chris Enright definitely provide a different ambiance and sound for sure. And while I definitely agree, Arcadia is not the easiest listen when you go to studio, especially considering where it's at as a song now. It's still very impressive for a debut album and a debut single, if you want to look at it that way. Very impressive as far as like just getting started out for them. But then also want to talk a little about the lyrics and kind of like what the overall meaning of Arcadia may be. And I think you had found something fairly interesting from the past where Rick and Peter actually spoke a little bit about this. You want to share that with our audience at home here, Alex?
Yeah, so just before everything kind of shut down for the pandemic, Osiris had an interview with Rick and Peter on the Under the Scales podcast, which I think is no longer a podcast. It's kind of just been reintegrated into a different show. But they were talking about the lyrics of Arcadia and interpretations, and Rick said something. Well, he said this quote, I think subjectivity is like the beauty of songwriting. I think Leonard Cohen talked about it at one point, how he didn't want, and then he said, I could be totally wrong about this actually, but the idea that like the hesitation to talk about what it means to you as the writer, because that doesn't necessarily even mean it's more right than how someone interprets it. So that's very, very vague, obviously, and it just like was an answer to how someone interpreted the song at the time, and he was like, that's not how I interpret it, but it doesn't mean it's wrong. So with that, how about we hear how you interpret the song, Mike, because I don't want to go first.
Well, first of all, I love Rick for saying that. That's kind of always been my approach to any art form, whether it's you're discussing film, music, whatever. It's always going to be open to interpretation. That's kind of the beauty of art, is that it's all subjective. And once you take in art, it gets mixed in with who you are as a person, your unique experiences, kind of what makes you you. So I really appreciate him saying that, because I feel like all of this is, subject to you. For me, like, what I get out of the song is that, to me, it just seems to be about overall like discovering oneself, and then a person or an idea or a thing seems to be spurring a period of growth and development. Maybe it's a love interest, whatever the case may be, just something that's a catalyst for causing you to take that step to reach Arcadia, whatever that may be to you as a person. That's kind of what I get from it, like a season of change that's leading to the next best thing coming in your life.
Yeah, and I think I mostly agree with you on that. I kind of came up with two interpretations that are in the same vein as that, where the more straightforward interpretation, I think, is finding love while grasping with serious struggles and other facets of your life, and it being the catalyst, like you said, to change. Like the lines, I stumble every time you do it, never going to get used to it. It means that the narrator of the song is like deeply affected by someone or something, like a love or an attraction or even just admiration, I would say. And then, Arcadia could symbolize just this idealized life or place that this person wants to be in. And then the other kind of interpretation I had is a little more abstract, but still in the same vein, where maybe it's about overcoming a past trauma or like cleaning up skeletons in the closet. Like the line "wood stilts and little red pills" makes me think about like literal and chemical crutches to move on and get through tough things in life, and wanting to move past that might be a theme of the song. So it kind of feels like the narrator is saying they aren't fully ready yet to get to that place of Arcadia, but they're trying to get there someday.
Yeah, that's totally spot on. And I think what's cool is both of our interpretations work pretty well. Like, when you think about, and obviously after you just gave that wonderful quote from Rick, I'm a little bit leery of like speculating on his interpretations and what he may mean. But he obviously has spoken at length about, how Hinduism and, kind of Eastern philosophies have influenced some of the other things that he's written about. And it definitely seems to be a theme in his work, just, transformation, growth, and renewal and rebirth. And I think that this kind of ties in well with so many of the other songs in the Goose catalog, as far as like that overall message, especially if what you added in was interesting too, coming from like maybe a difficult point towards making that next step forward. I think that's great.
Yeah, totally. But you don't want to tell the people that we're looking forward to trying to get Rick on for the 9-part podcast series where we ask him about all the songs and all the burning questions that we have. I'm gonna look right at the camera here. Rick, we're asking for you to come on for 9 podcasts. Thank you.
Yeah, we have a lot of burning questions, as always, and I don't think that we would ever run out of them. Not even possible. So yeah, that's kind of like just like a high level look at Arcadia as a song, but obviously we're both huge nerds here for the live stuff and the improv. So a lot of this episode is going to be taken up with just kind of us taking a look at some of the most notable versions of live Arcadia, and kind of just taking maybe like a holistic or overall look at how it's evolved over the years with some of these live versions. And so, with that being said, Alex, you found some really, really cool early versions of Arcadia that a lot of the internet may not have even seen or heard. So, you want to start off with one of your picks here? Because I know they're the earliest ones that we have on our list.
Yeah, and just real quick for the record, like this is not the most comprehensive list by any means. We just kind of handpicked notable versions. There's obviously a ton of amazing versions with it being played so many times. But yeah, we kind of scoured the internet preparing for this episode, and there's a lot of old live videos from Facebook from back in the day, which we're working to kind of archive those because Zuck has decided to delete all the live videos off Facebook in the next few months. So hopefully we'll get those all, recorded and kept in an archive for people to view indefinitely. But we started off with a version that was from their Facebook feed, Goose's Facebook feed in 2015, from June 17th, 2015, at the Acoustic in Bridgeport, Connecticut. And really interesting to see a version of this pre-Moon Cabin. And it's so raw and so fast. And they're just ripping this Arcadia at hyperspeed. And this was when Chris Enright was in the lineup, and he's just so slick on the keys. Like I said, for the studio cut, I really like his style a lot. So it's very similar style to what landed on the studio album, and really cool to hear like some of the tendencies that we still see out of Rick and the guys on the Arcadia progressions kind of in their rawest, earliest form here. And really interestingly enough, last note, I'm rambling a little bit, but very different from how Arcadia is now. They ended the song on a final chorus, and they just ended it with the chorus, which is really different.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add. You explained it perfectly. I definitely agreed. The thing that jumped out to me immediately was, God, how up tempo is this? I mean, Arcadia always has a bounce to it, but this is quick stepping for sure. But also, so much of the improv revolves around the keys, and a lot of the jam was just Rick kind of like admiring the keyboard playing, like, which was really cool to see. And also, just as a final little note, really neat too, because obviously at this point in the band doesn't have Peter in there yet, so also cool at the end to see Rick kind of doing the frontman leader thing on the microphone, telling everyone about the next show and everything. That was pretty neat to see.
Yeah, super cool and so different from now. And real quick, I just thought of this as I was saying that final point. I said we didn't really talk about the song structure of Arcadia, but it's a really unique song structure because it starts off with the chorus. There's almost like two choruses to this song. It starts off with the chorus, punches you in the face right away, and that's the chorus that this version ended on. But there's also kind of like that second chorus to seep up all the light part of the song. So really unique structure to this, and you don't see that a lot in catchy earworms like Arcadia is.
Yeah, you're totally right. I mean, is it a second chorus, a repeating bridge? Like, I mean, it's just an interesting song structure for sure.
Yep.
And so I know you've got a few more though. Like, what was the next really old one? Because you did a lot of work to find these. What was the next one that you had here?
So the next one I found was from August 12th, 2016 at the Rebirth Arts Festival in Easton, Connecticut. And this audience has grown here in this video, and we'll post up a link to a folder with the videos that we found of these. But it looks like a really fun setting and a really fun time to be a fan of the band because we just have like children jumping on stage and dancing with the band and running around as they're playing. And it's just the chillest, like holistic environment and was just so endearing to watch. They definitely slowed down and chilled out the pace at this point with Arcadia a little bit. And it's more in sync with what we hear a little bit today. But this one had some really nice flavor to it with like some alien synth to kick off the jam before Rick kind of does his thing and starts ripping into like a bluesier, almost 2019-esque outro.
Yeah, this is a really fun and hilarious video to watch. I think the Rebirth Arts Festival is just a really cool thing as an idea anyways, because it's completely volunteer, community-based festival in Connecticut. So just the vibes and mission of that festival in general is really cool. But yeah, I mean, just you can hear drunk people on the recording. You see kids dancing on stage. Just the vibes there are top-notch.
Yeah. Hopefully some of you all have a chance to watch these videos after the fact. So next up, we had a video from February 16th, 2017. And at the time of the recording of this podcast, this actually isn't up on El Goose yet, the full set list, but this is at the Space Ballroom in Hampton, Connecticut. And we have some lineup changes, which Goose is kind of famous for these days, but they had several in the early days too. Between the last version and this one. And we have Chris Junker on the keys and vocals now accompanying Rick, and Aaron Hagel accompanying Ben playing the percussion. And quick shout out to this version. We have none other than friend of the band, Greg Knight of the Great Beyond podcast and a longtime friend of Goose. I hope to have that guy on sometime because he's got some great stories, I'm sure. And Greg comes up on stage and just drops a freestyle to kick off this jam before we kind of take it to the outro with a quick organ solo and another ripping Rick solo, kind of the signature of ending Arcadia this year. At the time, this came right out of a Madhuvan, so just an outstanding run for anyone who got to see Goose this early. A Madhuvan into Arcadia, like, does it get better than that even still today?
No, I don't think it does. And I'll just be very brief on this one. I wrote 8 words exactly. There is a freestyle rap in this Arcadia. I mean, I really don't have anything to add to that.
Yeah, very, very cool and unique.
Totally.
And then the last of these kind of vintage 2015 to 2017 versions that we pulled for this episode was from Nectar's in Burlington, Vermont on November 10th, 2017. And this is just continuing the evolution of Arcadia. And what I noted the most about this version is that the Aaron Hagel percussion is very strong on this one. Like, it almost feels more congested than versions of Arcadia we get today, or even the ones we heard before, because there's absolutely zero space on this thing. It's all filled with like drum licks and percussion. And even in this short 2-year journey we've taken so far with Arcadia, you can hear the absolute commitment to improving vocals by Rick. And it just sounds so much better and much more confident here. And this was a more straightforward, compact jam than the other versions, but just really wanted to squeeze that in because they were opening up for Strange Machines at the time, and they had to squeeze this final song in.
Yeah, no, another really cool snapshot of the band early in time. It is very short, but you can tell, to your point, they're still very young, but they're also figuring it out, because it definitely feels like there's a leap forward from 2015, 2016, those other versions we were talking about. It's already starting to sound like more locked in and professional. So cool to see these snapshots of the band before, they've experienced all the success they're currently experiencing, but also still seeing so much abundant talent jumping off the screen and the speakers. And then just a minor note, I love the little island feel section they have in this one there, like right at the beginning of the improv. Really, really neat little vibe change.
Yeah, like I said, the percussion's strong on this one. Like, it definitely drives the feel of this. And while there is quote unquote zero space to this thing, it's just because they're trying to squeeze all these ideas into like a 6 or 7 minute version of Arcadia.
Yeah, you can hear them like trying to wrap up the show and introduce the next band like in this video. So yeah, please check it out. It's really, really cool. And I think you had another one from Connecticut that's still fairly early on, but we were getting a little bit closer to present time, from Bridgeport, Connecticut in 2018, I believe.
Yeah, so this is getting into the era of versions that you can pull up on Nugs finally. And this is from October 27th, 2018 in Bridgeport, Connecticut. And this was the second show of a 2-night stand, which we talked about at length on our second episode of the podcast, Goose History, because this was the Ghostbuster themed Netflix and Chill show, the second of those shows. And this is early on in the Peter era, and he's easing his way into kind of being a clav master at the time. But that's okay. He's taking it easy while Rick and Ben are trading off some of the coolest rhythmic dueling we've heard yet from the band. And Rick is just kind of finding his way with Arcadia still at this point, going through a roulette wheel of effects, and it's maybe not the craziest tone or effects that you'll ever hear Rick do, but it's just really fun to hear and see how they were experimenting with it at the time. And in typical Arcadia fashion. You're going to hear this a lot today. Hit a rip-roaring peak about 10 minutes in, and just when you think the band's going to rip to the end of the song, pivot into this like nice airy groove to get into a second peak. Peaks on peaks. That's Goose from this era on, and kind of becomes Goose's bread and butter before closing out in the typical fashion we expect out of an Arcadia.
Yeah, brilliantly said. I don't have too much to add to that. Just going to echo what you said, especially particularly in that era. So much of them as a band is just existing around peak, dissolve tension, build tension back up, another peak, and I mean, just rinse, wash, repeat. And if you're going back and listening to older Goose around this time period, it's very akin to the improv is like a roller coaster. I mean, it's just up and then back down and then back up again. So a lot of fun in that time.
Oh, yeah.
But obviously, current Goose has branched out pretty far from that tried and true formula at this point.
Yes, they have. But how about we get into the next show here, which is really the start of Goose's meteoric rise, I would say.
Yeah, so I don't think that this list would have been complete if we didn't have Peach Fest from 2019 on here. It's obviously the gateway song of choice for a lot of people that are now with this band. It brought so much of the jam band community, and it's pretty much impossible to overstate how much this concert meant for Goose's meteoric rise. You can just see in the second half of 2019, shows start selling out left and right, and a lot of it is just due to the fact that this video became so infamous and just shared endlessly on the internet for years now. And it's not going to be like the most noteworthy track in terms of like improvisation or a jam that just goes really out there. It's fairly short and compact actually, but it's more so just noteworthy for how much exposure it provided the band, the fact that it's kind of the launching pad, and also just highlights how great their production values were, even at a young age, and kind of just starting to get the infrastructure around them. The video production, the audio production, everything is just so clean and perfectly captures the fun environment of that festival. I feel like if you watch it, you kind of just feel like you can immediately feel internally that everyone that was there was just vibing out at the highest frequency.
Oh, definitely. That's one of my favorite parts of watching the video of it is just seeing the crowd erupt. And we're fully in the Peter era here, finally. 2019 was a real pivot point in Goose's history, like you said. And yeah, this is a compact version because they were early in the festival and trying to squeeze in as many songs as they could. But hot damn, that is an electric Rick solo to close this thing out. And that PRS tone, it hits my heartstrings perfectly, dude. Like, there's nothing quite like it. And this was definitely my gateway song, like you said, along with many others. And I think it's still the premier song to show someone who's never listened to Goose before and likes live music, kind of be like, hey, check this one out, because it's pretty short and amazing.
Yeah, it just does the work right away. It doesn't take very long. It just gets into your system pretty much immediately. And then I had one other pick from 2019 that I thought was pretty noteworthy here from the Madison Theater in Covington, Kentucky. It was a really interesting start to that one. Mostly just starts off with Peter taking the lead with some cool 80s sounding key runs while Ben is playing like incredibly chilled and laid back, especially for if you've listened to a lot of older Goose, very chill and laid back for Ben's style. But Peter has some crazy modulations to his sound, and they get into a little bit more of an intense and funkier space than you would even expect from Arcadia, even though it is typically funky. But they shift into this grungier space thanks to No Small part to Rick embracing some distortion and or reverb delay that builds into this nice short peak. And you'll probably hear this a few times on the episode as well, because it was definitely true of older Arcadias. The last section is an extremely gorgeous, blissy piece of music. And that was definitely, there's almost like a line in the sand, like for me around 2022, 23. Before that, almost all the Arcadias have at least one blissy section, and then it kind of ventures out. There are definitely some blissy sections in Arcadia that are better than this one, but it's quite excellent, and it's an early example of where Arcadia could go to.
That's so well said, man, because our notes are very similar, and we did not consult each other at all before this recording. So I wrote down, start off in 80s synth funk fusion groove. So, and then I said the metamorphosis into a beautiful celestial blissy section is a precursor to many Arcadias to come. And this feels like an early nod to the peak of those in 2021, in my opinion, because it sounds like the cousin of the very famous Mission Ballroom Arcadia that's beloved.
which we're definitely going to get to. We would be idiots if it wasn't on the list. So, stay patient. We're going to get there for you.
Hey, we are idiots, but we're not that big of idiots.
There's levels to this for sure. And then I know you had another good one from the band Stomping Grounds from 2020 from South Farms, which really good show. I would highly recommend anyone that hasn't heard it to just check out that show.
Yeah, so that was just 2020 during the COVID era. This was a pod show where, everyone was kind of in their little bubbles, and this is really, really kind of cool. If you go back and you see like video clips and listen back to this whole show, it's like really interesting to see like, wow, how separated everyone is. The music is really connecting everyone in such a cool way. And I feel like Rick and Trevor were on a mind meld on this one, kind of latching onto this like seesawing, diddly back and forth sound that goes into almost like this like double stop, slowed down surfer rock vibe that's really unique for Arcadia. So I cannot suggest this enough, and a really welcome escape for anyone who was listening to Goose at the time during this god-awful COVID era.
Totally, and we've said this numerous times, but nobody was killing it more than Goose during COVID, and I think that their COVID era is really worth listening to because not only were they so prolific compared to other artists, but I think it was also like one of the more like wildly interesting times for them just trying different stuff and switching up song formats and, trying fast versions of This Old Sea and things like that. So really cool era for the band, and I think that they maximized their time during COVID better than pretty much anyone.
Oh, totally. And like, if you want a beach vibes Arcadia, this is it. And I really hope they kind of bring this back at some point because it's really cool. Like, this is definitely the version to play if you're sitting by the beach.
Yeah, almost got like a Vasudo feel to it. Like if Vasudo took on Arcadia, like this may be like somewhat close to where it ends up. So yeah, really good point. And then next we have an absolute monster, probably one of, if not the biggest on the list for most people, I would assume, but Northland, Swansea, New Hampshire, 6/11/2021. I'm sure you've got some thoughts on it because most of us do, Alex.
Well, I'll let you gush first because I know that this has moved up your list of favorite Arcadias.
Yeah, so okay, I will go first then in that case. But yeah, we famously both agreed that Mission Ballroom was the best Arcadia. And I've listened to Arcadia, I'm not exaggerating, probably 300 or 400 times in the last 2 weeks. I mean, just it's the playlist to my life at this point. I hear it when I'm sleeping. I hear it at all times. But after going through this process with you, I have changed my mind. Northland Swansea is officially my GOAT Arcadia now. It's really laid back style of funk, really humongous fan of the pocket they get into in that first section. Feels so loose and yet also like very propulsive, and moves into this extremely catchy earworm of a progression that feels all at once extremely poppy, but also very soulful. And there's just tons of fun accents from Peter and Trevor's playing. Trevor especially is so graceful and melodic and generally just kind of goes all over his neck on the bass there. Around 10 minutes, they shift into this gorgeous and very full and blissy space that kind of reminds me of like, this is going to sound bad, and I don't mean it as a negative because I'm saying this is my favorite Arcadia now, but almost has vibes to like adult contemporary music from the 90s in the second section, particularly around the 12-minute mark. It sounds like it could easily go into like an outro for an old Counting Crows song or something like that. Just an incredibly uplifting jam and also very unique. And yeah, it just stands out so much more than other Arcadias. It's just doing its very much its own thing that this is my new number one. that Mission Ballroom isn't amazing, and I'll gush over that here in a second. But yeah, any thoughts on it, Alex?
Maybe I'll save my thoughts on the debate between Swansea and Mission Ballroom 2021 after we get to Mission Ballroom, because that was towards the end of 2021. But this is definitely the most unique Arcadia jam to this point, in my opinion. And you really kind of nailed the description in a lot of ways. I don't have too much else to add. I really did find that this one moved through ideas so efficiently and so quickly that my main complaint really is like, I wish this was like 15 minutes longer, because it's just outstanding. And some of these ideas were so cool and just didn't have a lot of time to them. But it's not like they're shortchanged by any means. It's just like, I just want to live there longer. Start off with that punchy staccato riff the entire band latches onto before the organ gets busted out early, and Peter really gets to shine on a slow groove. And the jam pivots around, like I said, gets into a major key space, into that really free flowing, smile inducing section you said, mellow out a bit, get into a really emotional riff by Rick again that peaks on peaks on peaks, and we kind of get a fake out towards the end to give you one last peak before we close the song out. So yeah, it's quite a ride, and it's my number 2 Arcadia. Just shout out to Swansea. It's just outstanding.
Yeah, and a lot of these, once you start getting to the best of the best, we're like literally splitting hairs here. And all gas, no brakes, because you've got another good one here next from the same year, 2021, Legend Valley in Thornville, Ohio, from June 18th, 2021, that I know you've got a few thoughts on.
Yeah, this is quite a week for Goose, man. Just 2 versions a week apart from each other. And this is just another outstanding version, and shows you just the scope of how crazy Arcadia was in 2021. By far the best year for it, in my opinion. This one has more of like a really, really heavy clav start to it, which we see a lot in Arcadia now, but this is kind of the start of like Peter really finding his footing with that, in my opinion. And then we get into Outer Space again about halfway through, where Rick kind of takes control at that point, and we go into like a really quick paced outro to this song that eventually kind of goes into this like really gorgeous closing. And it's really strange to kind of end the song in a more relaxed way after kind of going to like hyperspeed halfway through, but really, really fun version.
Yeah, definitely very unique. It's interesting. The end is part that sticks out to me. I'm kind of probably a sucker for just like ending on that traditional outro final burst of energy, but we're all suckers for uniqueness here on this podcast. So definitely really worthy. And like you said, 2 in 1 week, just absolutely monstrous.
Yeah, and that's actually a really great point. Like, with how much we listen to Goose now that we've started this podcast, it's like when we say something is unique, it's almost like a huge benefit for us who listen to like everything multiple times to try to get ready and know as much as we can before we talk with y'all through these airwaves.
Yeah, like unexpected left turns become like just so exciting to us, and ultimately I think end up becoming our bread and butter, because yeah, just lots of listening. And then couple more from 2021 before, well, one really big one, but before we get to the big one, also want to shout out very briefly here State Theater, Portland, Maine, from October 29th, 2021. Funky start as always. You're going to hear that a lot with Arcadia, but really great clav work from Peter. I really think you're starting to hear the progression from his playing on the clav here in 2021 a great bit. And there's a really unique, slightly crunchy and warm 70s style tone from Rick on this one, which lends itself well because they hit a very rock heavy first peak. But Trevor's playing is one of the main reasons I wanted to highlight this one in particular. It's just really a standout and outstanding work. He is putting all these melodic accents behind Rick's solo, and then as a band, they downshift to this familiar twinkling, blissy, ethereal space before moving into like a slightly darker, bluesy, atmospheric section. And then it goes full dark for a couple minutes, which is really notable at this phase in the band for Arcadia, before just one of the sickest transitions. We're suckers for transitions here on this podcast. Just a really, really amazing transition back into the Arcadia outro.
I can't say it much better than that myself, honestly. But like I said, my notes are basically like, surprise, surprise. We break down into what seems to be a standard blissy heavenly space with a little bit of psychedelic flavor that suddenly warps into a full dark psychedelic twinge section that's almost like a bad trip or something. But, then Arcadia kind of thrives at the end and comes back and rips us back into the outro we expect. But really, really cool version of this. It's like every month in 2021 has just an outstanding version of Arcadia, it feels like, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we're not even done because we're at the Mission Ballroom in Denver, Colorado, November of 2021. So, I mean, let's get into your favorite version of Arcadia here.
Yeah, so this is my favorite version, as you just said, but this one kicks off in a very clav and whammy pedal party back and forth between Peter and Rick with just some terrific interlaid snare accents by Ben, which just gives it a little different of a feel rhythmically than we normally get coming right into the jam of Arcadia. And then the groove just eventually takes over and it kind of goes into standard fare. But I just found that kind of jumping off point to be really interesting. And we lock onto that standard feel, like I said, and Rick just starts adding more and more of that kind of signature reverby, delayed, heavenly sound that takes into that peak bliss sound that Arcadia is kind of getting famous for by this point in its history. But this is the peak of that peak bliss, in my opinion, and it's the best you'll hear out of all the versions of Arcadia. And if you're a big fan of the 2024 Philly Tumble, like this is the Arcadia for you, because this is an even better version of that kind of bliss. And it's just so free floating, flowy, full of interesting ideas while also having tons of room to breathe, and such an emotional solo by Rick to take us out in this thing. The ending is definitely the part that's referenced the most on this thing, where Rick latches onto kind of his signature PRS sound at the time, and Trevor's playing this like outstanding bass line that really anchors the entire jam to the finish line. And in my opinion, the guitar has become like a full extension of Rick's heart in a more united fashion than you're normally accustomed to, and it just soars and soars right to the finish line. You could listen to this thing 15 times in a row and it never gets old, in my opinion.
Yeah, very well said. I'll be brief here because that was just very well said. And we just talked about this one a few episodes ago, but yeah, I absolutely love this. The Bliss section definitely reminds me of the Philly Tumble. I was texting you about that earlier this week. And it's some of the best that you're ever going to hear from Rick, just dense run after dense run. And he hits that emotionality where it just feels like it's going to pierce your fucking soul. And I mean, it's very much in the same wheelhouse as the Philly Tumble. So if you want to hear some of the best at what Rick can do as far as tapping into emotions, and moving you as a human being, this is definitely one of the best places to start. And you could have it on your playlist all day long and you're probably not going to get sick of it, I would imagine.
Oh, yeah. I never get sick of this, and I also never get sick of the Swansea version that is your favorite. And going back to kind of what we alluded to before, now that we've talked a little bit about Mission, I just wanted to say there's no wrong answers here. It's like picking your favorite flavor of pizza or something, where Swansea is super unique. It's like getting a really unique flavored pie, like some kind of spin on buffalo chicken or something crazy. And it's just like the best kind of unique pizza you ever had. But this is like the classic, best regular cheese pizza you've ever had in your life. Like, you're never going to get a better slice than this, in my opinion. And it's just like, yeah, maybe it's not the most unique thing you've ever had in the world, but it's just like a tried and true, amazing staple, and it's the best of what Goose can do with Arcadia.
1,000%. Just like Rick said about the lyrics, it's a great part about music. It's all subjective and open to interpretation. So lots of flavors here. And hopefully by the time we get through the end of these Arcadias, you've found like the one that's the best fit for you, but definitely no wrong answers.
No wrong answers at all.
And as great as 2021 was, I don't feel like 2022 is that much different. Really good year for Arcadias here as well. I want to start off with the Brooklyn Bowl in Nashville from 3/5/2022. And it's a funky start like it always is, but Peter staying on the piano here gives you a different dynamic than most early sections of what you typically were hearing in Arcadia. And so because of that, you get a lot of fun interplay between him and Rick, and it settles into a mellower Blissy section, still very Blissy, but really a little bit more chill. But it goes into a nice peak before like this spiraling staircase of tension and a really extended Arcadia outro. Overall, probably going to be one of my weaker selections compared to just the rest of the excellence on this list, but I think it was still noteworthy just because of those few unique aspects to it for this time of the band.
Yeah, and I think this is a worthy pick because a theme of a lot of Arcadias in 2022 is it got a lot more slow played compared to 2021 that was kind of like more up tempo, and this was a slower version, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but yeah, I think you said it great.
Perfect. So want to get into for sure. This is obviously one of the biggest performances in the band's history, but Radio City Music Hall, New York, 6/25/22. Papa Trey guesting on it. What do you have to say about this one, Alex? Any notes here? I'm sure everyone's talked about this one ad nauseum.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone listening to this show has ever heard of this guy, Trey Anastasio. He plays in this band called Fish, and they're pretty good. Like they have some crowds that show up, and they're still kind of finding their way, I think.
Yeah, they're all right.
No, this is known as like the quote unquote passing of the torch show by Goose fans, and I kind of find that trope to be kind of eye rolling sometimes. But anyway, this Arcadia comes off the heels of Trey guesting on Hunger Sight. It goes right into Arcadia, and Trey sings a little bit on it, which is kind of cool. But what really shines about this is maybe it's not the craziest in terms of concepts and things like that, but the guitar interplay between Trey and Rick is just outstanding. And Trey, just on this version, when you listen, it's like, oh yeah, like this is why he's considered like the gold standard of today's guitarists in terms of listening and reacting in real time and giving jams a unique flair and his own voice to them. And yeah, more rhythmic kind of jam to start where they're both kind of playing off each other while everyone else accompanies them before we kind of get into a really cool, gorgeous, almost playful dueling guitar sound to take us to the finish line.
Yeah, I mean, you can't overstate how landmark this whole show is. Obviously, everybody and their brother has it on vinyl. It means so much to everyone. And I think one of the really cool things is, like you said, the interplay between Rick and Trey. Obviously, that's the main attraction with this one. I really love, too, how Trey kind of early on chooses to utilize some fuzz against Rick's relatively clean tone. And Peter starts off on clav like he typically would at the beginning, but realizes pretty quickly that he should pivot to keys, which opens it up for them to get into some almond territory again. And I really love how I'll skip over the Blissy section, but just the peak and they cool down for like half a second with this flawless transition into the Arcadia outro. And I think the outro is very noteworthy because it takes its time, but it still has this intensity that's like maybe not exploding or burning, but just like almost more smoldering. And that gives it a unique feel there at the ending, which I just really love. But I mean, at the end of the day, the big takeaway is Goose and Trey.
Yeah, just incredible stuff. And it never gets old watching the footage of Trey's guest spots from Radio City. This is definitely one of the landmark shows in this band's history and cannot be talked about enough.
Definitely not, my friend. And we've got one more from 2022. Andrew Brady Center on 12/30/2022, day before New Year's. Very cool and unique extended intro on this one. Totally one of a kind vibes to start it out. Kind of space bliss vibes, some marimba piano. You're getting that early on, which is, I think, one of the more noteworthy early utilizations of that sound from Peter, some of the most gorgeous and varied runs from Rick, and the intro is so fun to listen to that every time I kind of wish it was its own thing, because it's just a really cool space to hang out in, honestly. And it's just so unique for the intro to Arcadia's that it just kind of reminds you of like some of the chances they take with their flow down intros. I really love this one, and it's a hard left turn right from the beginning, but I'd love to hear any thoughts you want to add on here, Alex.
I don't have too much else to add because the intro is really the most noteworthy part of this Arcadia. It's really, really cool. It's almost like 6-ish minutes long, which is just wild, and it's absolutely gorgeous. And the marimba sound is almost like got more delay or like reverb to it, where it's like longer sounding notes, which is really cool. But yeah, kind of going back to what I had said earlier about 2022 Arcadias, this one's also a little slow played. That's very Trevor and funk forward once we get into the main Arcadia jam here. And it kind of eases its way, and somehow you're like, look in one direction, and suddenly you're like in head banging, kind of like late 70s Led Zeppelin-esque harder rock riffing before Peter kind of takes us to church with like this organ outro, which is just kind of cool. And Goose loves Cincinnati. That's not really all I got to say, because this is a really fun listen and another very different version from kind of the more standard chalk versions we've talked about.
Yeah, they definitely pull at all the stops for Cincinnati. It obviously meant a lot to them when they were first getting started out, made a ton of stops there, and it just continues. But only have one pick from 2023, which I found kind of interesting. I did do a lot of digging around on 2023 for Arcadias. The one that I felt like was by far the most noteworthy was the one from the Cap Theater, which, shocking, another place that, the kind of Goose's home away from home. They don't really hold back when they go there either. One of the most noteworthy things for me was just the cool noodling from Trevor starting this one out, that they actually kind of agree to build the thing around. And I just always love when my boy Trevor gets center stage for a bit, even though I know he probably doesn't necessarily seek that out. But everyone kind of jumps into this poppy funk vibe, but Peter, just being Peter, quickly makes it weird and throws in some flourishes to where they all just kind of, I feel like, back off and let loose. And what I found also really noteworthy from this one was I really just enjoyed the drumming a lot in the first section from Ben, and the million different places that Rick decides to go. And this jam, genre-wise, it doesn't venture too far off either side of the road, but it does make some interesting stops along the way on that road. And I was mostly just finding myself enjoying that it was so much fun listening to them just go 100 miles an hour for so long, and wondering, like, how long can you guys keep this on the rails? Because it goes a bit further than you think. But yeah, I just found it a lot of fun, and one of the most noteworthy from 2023 for me.
Yeah, this is the version of 2023 as far as I'm concerned. Totally agree with you there. And you said it well. I think the main standout for me, like you, is that really long, extended bass groove. Trevor really gets a long runway to shine here. And it's listed as having Father John Misty teases throughout the jam. I totally agree with that. And yeah, we go from that slow groove into kind of like a shuffling, almost like Cotter-esque triumphant finish, which is kind of interesting because a little over a year later, Cotter is making his first appearance with Goose, same venue.
That segues perfectly into Cotter's first show at the Cap Theater again, April 8th, 2024. Start off yet again with Trevor leading the way, loud and clear from the jump. Pretty cool, ambient, funky vibes initially. And they keep it in the mellow lane for a lot longer than you would typically see Arcadia. Definitely exhibiting some more patience early, which becomes kind of a hallmark of the band lineup with Cotter in it. But Peter starts sprinkling extraterrestrial vibes, which was also a theme of 2024. And before sprinkling in some dark and crunchy clav with the swampy mix from Trevor and the spacey tone from Rick, this peaks pretty amazingly and is one of the more seamless segues into the Arcadia outro that you will ever hear, in my opinion, just specifically because of all that weird combination of textures that they work towards.
Uh, yeah, pretty well said. I just love this legendary Moon Cabin Eclipse show as a whole, and this is a highlight from that for sure. And I don't necessarily think this one covers like a ton of territory because it's like a really cool like slow build clav party all the way. But and maybe I'll come off a little bit as a hypocrite based off of our Goose Hot Takes episode because I said that controversially I said that the word patience is overused a lot. But this is like an early example, and maybe not the best example, of how these patient jams with Cotter were getting formed even early on in his tenure with Goose. And I just love the way Cotter has transformed the sound of Goose in general to making full band cohesive jams a priority. And so, yeah, while it's not necessarily covering like a ton of landmark different sounds, it's a really satisfying build to the finish line.
1,000%. Very, very well said. And I think that's perfectly said specifically because of the fact that it doesn't fully go the patient route, but it is a little taste of what we would see a lot more of later on. So, yeah, great call out there.
Yep.
Also, kind of going to be correcting myself a little bit here because when we recap the Nashville show from Ascend Amphitheater on 10/24/24, I kind of dismissed the Arcadia as not really much, but I've listened to it like 10 times in the last week here, and I've completely reversed my opinion on this one. After going back to it, it was so much more interesting in that mellow first section than I realized because they hit this bluesy rock vibe built around this serious earworm of a lick. And it's really cool to me because Trevor is actually the one that discovers the riff and that they choose to build it out from. And if you go far enough to actually watch the video of the concert, there's a really cool moment when Trevor first plays the lick the very first time. And you don't see this from Rick hardly ever, but he actually turns his body fully quarter clockwise to face Trevor directly, gives him a wild grin, and just goes like, oh, it's on. And he starts mimicking Trevor's riff. The whole band kind of builds a progression out of it. And as they go through the jam, you will hear the riff cycled back in sporadically by Trevor, by Rick, little teases of it by Peter. And, you know, we've said it before, but we're huge Trevor stands here. So just really cool seeing my boy get a moment that it's just some different stuff, specifically, I think, because we're building around a bass lick.
Dude, that's my main note. Like I have like two sentences on this, and I'm like many of the great jams we discussed, this is anchored around a great Trevor lick. And I don't necessarily agree that this is like the most outstanding version of Arcadia or anything, but it's great. It's fun. And I think what's really fun about this is outside of the cat version we just talked about, this is like the first time Goose played a quote unquote longer version of Arcadia all year because most of them were getting squeezed into these like 10, 11, 12-minute slots at the end of an encore or something. And it's nice to have some breathing room to let Arcadia kind of just do its thing because whether we like it or not, which we do like it, like Arcadia is still one of the best jam vehicles in the catalog, in my opinion.
1,000%. And we've said on quite a few episodes here recently that like Arcadia is fully back. I would maybe go so far as to say this fall and winter run is when you could start to actually say that and see the tangible evidence. And maybe the biggest example by far, the one that like caused us to snap our necks anyways, was coming up next from Goosemas here recently. And I know we waxed poetically on our Goosemas recap, but it seems like we're not alone in the community as far as this Goosemas Arcadia being kind of a cool and major turning point as to, you know, why we think the song is back and why the jams are going to be in a really good place heading into 2025. So anything you want to recap or echo from thoughts that we've given here on this amazing Goosemas Arcadia?
So I think that going back to Nashville a little bit, backtracking, putting Arcadia mid-set like that really kind of shifted the perspective on the song a little bit, and then getting it pulled again, like forcing their hand at bingo to play it mid-set again, was really like the turning point, I feel like, for Arcadia for the better. And this version really latches on to this kind of like seesawing back and forth riff that again doesn't necessarily cover like a ton of ground, but it's just really fun and almost feels like a cousin of Welcome to Delta tone wise or something like that. And yeah, it kind of explores this territory for a very extended period, slow build. Where it really shines is the pivot towards the end of this jam, which is way too short. I wish they spent more time here. And it doesn't feel shortchanged again, but it's just like kind of like Swansea. You're like, man, this is really cool. Like, I wish this was 5 minutes longer. And instead of kind of riding the sustained pink from earlier in the jam, the band kind of slows down and hits a really unique groove that has Peter on the vintage vibe while Trevor's kind of dancing around him with some really, really terrific melodic bass. Trevor was really shining on Arcadia late 2024, I got to say, and just a really, really fun few minutes of Arcadia to take us to the finish line.
Yeah, I'll be brief as well on this one because we're starting to get closer on the list of things that we just very recently talked about. But the couple things that jump out to me the most are the shrieking, piercing sounds that Peter gets out of that clav early on, and just how amazingly smooth him and Rick transition out of that first section into the almond-like jam, and the spacey transition on top of it, bridging into the outro. It's just very unique. We're big fans of hard left turns, and especially at the time of year and what had come previously for like the last year and a half of Arcadia, this was definitely representative of a left turn to me. And just cool to see the band taking chances. And if you were lucky enough to see the interview with Rick from this past week that our friends at AAT put out, it seems like Goosemas was kind of a catalyst for them in terms of rethinking not just set list but improv and kind of being more open to taking chances and stuff like this. So it's very evident that definitely was the case.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's really fun and interesting. Like we talked about the beginning of the year, the cap kind of being an early example of Cotter introducing like some new ways to be patient during jamming and kind of do a slow build full band jam. And then this Arcadia kind of bookending the year, even though there's one more version in the year. This was kind of the better version of the two, in my opinion, in December. And it's a very cool, patient jam that takes a chance and pivots at the end. So just kind of more payoff there.
Absolutely. And then with how much we've gushed about this most recent winter run here from February, would not be doing ourselves any justice to not include one or two from that. And we chose two from that. So I'm going to start off here with the Miller High Life Theater from Milwaukee. And we were obviously lucky enough to be there. Really dig the ambient, spacey vibes to this one. It moves back into Bliss like Arcadia's of years past, which is kind of cool because you're starting to see, like we discussed earlier, versions, kind of always had a Blissy section. So this was kind of the first pivot back to that. And it goes into this towering peak. And one of my favorite moments of the entire Milwaukee run was just they slowed it down to almost like we're going to end the song early and then psych, bring the house down with a totally jacked up outro. I love how even like Getty's lights almost disappeared before bringing it back like that. So really outstanding and a lot of fun. Anything you want to add?
No, just that I wasn't there, and I'm jealous of you. You said we were there, and it was just you, buddy, and
Well,
I'm
you were there for
jealous.
the run, so and I know you were with me in spirit that night. So, not to mention, I know you were also watching it from your couch because we watch every show. So, we'll just say that I got that awesome Arcadia because of your good vibes that you were putting out into the air.
I always put out good vibes when you're at a show without me, dude. I want everyone to have the best time, even if I have FOMO. But I think by this point, we were feeling pretty safe to say Arcadia is back in 2025, and it's exploring some really cool space. And maybe we sound like broken records, but it's just continuing kind of like the quote unquote patient feel to Arcadia's in this last run of shows with a very emotional, flourishing solo to take us to heaven in Milwaukee.
Absolutely perfectly said. And then the last one, History from Toronto, and that was 2/11/25. What do you think about this one? This is our most recent version here.
Uh, Again, we said it on the episode. I just want to have everyone thank Mikey
Yep.
for talking shit about this Arcadia about halfway through, being like, I don't know, it started off a little slow, and then it just pivots into like a ripping rush to the finish line. Like, hot damn, it's hard to find an Arcadia, even on this outstanding list of Arcadias, with as much like punch rock drive for the last 10-ish minutes. And really crunchy sound by Rick, really fun, high energy way to kind of have the first Arcadia of Canada show up.
Yeah, I'm not going to stop talking shit, people. So I'll keep getting the jams to elevate for you in that way, or doing my part anyways. um, the reason was the initial section of this, and I did a quick comparison here over the last week just to make sure I wasn't losing my mind or imagining things that weren't there. But the initial section contains a very similar vibe actually to the Charlotte show I was at last summer as far as Arcadias go. Just that kind of sleepy ambient space with the gradual looping riffs texturizing the space pretty much. And I mean, you'll hear it like on some Borns as well. It's kind of like a general vibe that they go to before they kind of pick a direction. And so it was a little bit sleepy at first, and then when they transitioned to the country-esque vibes, reminiscent of the Goosemas Arcadia, I'm just like, okay, it's good, but I was wondering where we were going from there. And then, of course, as I said something to you, they exploded into weird arrow from the Fox almost adjacent space before coming back around into the outro and just absolutely exploding my brain and putting a gigantic smile on my face because yeah, I just complete foot and mouth moment, but glad to have it because it meant that I heard a really, really ripping Arcadia outro.
Hey, yeah, and all in jest, my friend, because we were
Of
texting
course.
like, and I was about to like send the text, be like, oh yeah, we'll see where it goes or something, and then like the dots disappeared because I got a chance to delete my text to you once it pivoted. It was almost like Rick started adding like almost like this Middle Eastern flair a little bit, and like you said, Fox Arrow esque, where Peter starts just taking us to outer space a little bit, and this thing just erupts. Like such a fun outro.
Yeah, absolutely outstanding. So I'm glad I spoke up. I'm going to keep doing it so that I can elevate jams in my own way, or I'll pretend I'm doing it anyways.
Goose always plays terrible versions of Rosewood Heart. Like they never play good versions. Like let's get
Yeah,
some.
10 years since the last good Rosewood Heart.
Okay, please play Rosewood Heart more, Goose. We love Rosewood Heart. We don't mean it.
Reverse psychology all day. That was our last live pick. So we were kind of hoping with this whole thing that we take a little bit deeper dive on some of like our favorite songs from the Goose catalog and hopefully take kind of like an overall look at how the improv has shifted throughout the years and hopefully end the episode with a decent at least starters pack of songs to put on your playlist to explore the best improv that exists around the track. So we will be publishing a playlist here on Nugs with everything that we discussed on the episode and hoping that you enjoy it. And if you do, then we'll probably do some more of these. But any parting thoughts or final overall thoughts on this Arcadia deep dive, Alex, before we sign off?
No, this was a lot of fun, and hopefully y'all enjoyed this format of kind of diving deep into one song. We didn't know how it was going to go, but it wound up being a really enjoyable couple weeks of listening. I gotta say, I think Arcadia probably has like arguably the most re-listenability of any song in the catalog. Like it was just like it never got old listening back to Arcadia for me. even though I heard "Soup Up All the Light" about 400 times in the last few weeks, like you said. But incredible stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I loved waking up every day and hearing "Stumble Every Time You Do It" in my head. So I mean, it was a glorious 14 days. It's hard to be in a bad mood when Arcadia is playing nonstop in your head. So definitely one of the best songs, and probably like the most obvious choice. But can't wait to do more of these and hopefully get into some songs that have a little bit more diversity improv wise too, because I know there's a lot of songs in the catalog that kind of go all over the map. So really fun times. Again, we've got a ton of great topics coming your way, and obviously new album is coming up here in just a few weeks. Tour is getting started in a few weeks, so we've got a lot of great stuff planned. Like we said at the beginning, please give us a follow if you're interested at Slow Ready Pod on pretty much every platform out there. Send us a message, send us an email. We'd love to chat with anyone in the community about all things Goose, and we'll be coming back here soon. So thank you so much for the support, and hope you all have a wonderful week.
Yeah, thank you all so much. And if you like this format, let us know what song you want us to do next. That'd be really cool. Just reach out to us on socials or email us, slowreadypod@gmail.com or at slowreadypod on all the socials. Thanks again.